Well, good afternoon, folks. Aaron Dorr here with the American Firearms Association, guys. We have a major jam-packed show for you today. Joined with Chris, Patrick, Alex from our office. A big update for gun owners today. So get signed into this video. Guys, we've been talking to you guys for weeks, months, a year now about one of the ways that we can hold the line against Joe Biden's tyranny. And AFA members helped us stop Biden's entire congressional gun control agenda last year in Washington, D.C. The guy can't get 50 votes right now on congressional gun control, let alone 60. That's thanks to you and all the work that we have done to put pressure on the Senate. But as always, it's not stopping this old tyrant from grabbing his pen and signing executive orders. And those are coming at us really fast. And that's why we worked so hard at the state level to pass the Second Amendment Preservation Act. And guys, if you've not seen the news today, it is breaking all over America right now. The Department of Justice is taking the law we passed in Missouri last year into federal court. The DOJ and Merrick Garland himself are in a panic about the impact of SAPA, and AFA is leading this charge across the country.
I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know what the Second Amendment Preservation Act is and why it's so important, what it simply does in the states that pass it, it simply allows those states to say, look, you guys can pass whatever gun control bills that you want in D.C. However, you cannot commandeer state and local law enforcement organizations in our state in order to try to enforce those things. So it's a robust, wonderful piece of legislation based on the 10th Amendment that simply destroys Joe Biden's executive orders, their gun control laws, whatever, by making them unenforceable, essentially, in any given state. That's why we're so dang happy to highlight what's happening here in Missouri.
So Aaron, Aaron, let me ask you a question real quick. If I'm an average gun owner sitting out there right now trying to figure out, okay, maybe if I'm just in Missouri, we passed this great law a couple years ago, American Firearms Association, Missouri Firearms Coalition, we're all over the ground on this thing. Why would Merrick Garland, this guy who was going to be appointed to the Supreme Court, he's now the AG, why would he be so intensely focused and personally involved in this case in the state of Missouri? What are the consequences if he doesn't get his way and we get ours?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to kind of back up here just for a moment, he's been trying and failing all along since we passed this bill into law last year. They tried to overturn SAPA in circuit court. They got laughed out of court. They tried to overturn it last week in the Missouri State Supreme Court. And the way it sounds, they're going to be laughed out of that court as well. There is a full-on panic happening right now in the DOJ because what this means is that their executive order-based gun control agenda, they're counting on state cops, troopers, deputies, city cops to enforce all of that. And when we passed SAPA in Missouri and we say Missouri cops may not enforce federal laws, their entire manpower scheme fell apart. And they now know if they don't stop SAPA in Missouri, not only is Missouri going to be able to ignore all of their federal tyranny, it's going to explode across the country. It's already happening. We already have
exploding everywhere.
We have identical language passing committee in Iowa. It's on the debate calendar actually today in Wyoming. It's being pushed by organizations in Georgia, Ohio, Minnesota, Indiana, Pennsylvania, across America. Everyone now sees, especially in red states, passing SAPA is the way to do two things. Number one, give a great big middle finger to Joe Biden. And hey, that's motivation enough for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, heck, I'm down with that.
It takes away all the manpower, and their federal gun control agenda will collapse. They will make no mistake. They could still come into our states with federal authorities and go house to house, rounding up guns. That will never happen. The optics on that are so bad. If they thought that mask mandates was bad for them in the midterms, the first time an ATF SWAT team hits a home in Missouri and that crap goes out on Fox News, they will destroy their party for a generation.
Yeah.
Well, we get this question all the time, guys, and I want to hit it right out of the gate. A lot of people say, where does my money go if I join up with the American Firearms Association, guys? JoinAFA.org. This battle that the American Firearms Association is in court in the state of Missouri. Aaron was at the Supreme Court in Missouri just the other day. This is where your resources go, period. Okay, we are fighting in the courts. We're fighting in the state capitals. We're fighting in the United States Capitol. Join the American Firearms Association today. Join our efforts to kick Merrick Garland's butt, not only in the courts, but all over this country. Kick Joe Biden's butt. Join up today with the American Firearms Association. JoinAFA.org. Join up now before the end of the show, guys. We will read your name and your city here on the show.
What's amazing, I think, for a lot of us now is the fact that, last week in Missouri, we had some, pimply-faced kid from the DOJ out there trying to shut down and invalidate SAPA law. Today, we have these quotes from Merrick Garland himself. And it's very obvious now in the New York Times article, Politico, all across the country that Missouri is the only state that the DOJ cares about, because what we did in Missouri is, at least right now, one of a kind. Because in Missouri, any violation of SAPA is enforced by we the people with civil penalties and civil fines. And that terrifies these people because they're counting. Merrick Garland knows if these idiots across the states, if they want to pass SAPA and it requires the governor or the attorney general or the county prosecutor to enforce it, that will never happen. Those political calculations are too high. But when we the people can drag the St. Louis Police Department into court, or Kansas City Police Department into court, or Springfield or Columbia or your town into civil court for damages, that's the sweet spot. They hate it. Merrick Garland's quote on Politico is, "This act impedes criminal enforcement operations in Missouri. The United States will work tirelessly to ensure that our state and local enforcement partners are not penalized for doing their jobs to keep our communities safe." Because in their mind, all law enforcement is federalized. In their mind, they have the right to tell your local cops what laws we're going to have to enforce. That's how they think. They're tyrants. They're madmen tyrants running roughshod. And when we take back our manpower, they have nothing else. They've lost.
Something else very nefarious at work here. And I know I kind of sound like a broken record sometimes, but just a little recap lesson on the way America was set up. Police powers, enforcement powers, in our system of a constitutional republic were delegated to the states. That was done by our founding fathers for the very specific purpose of making sure that federal government can never become so big and so powerful that they can slaughter their citizens like most empires have done throughout the course of human history. And so that is why there is this move, this attempt by Congress, by Biden, by these alphabet agencies to try to federalize state and local law enforcement agencies and get them hooked on these federal monies, on these federal grant programs, on these contracts that they have with each other, these joint task forces, because the feds themselves don't have the resources to enforce things. Our founding fathers made sure that they did not, and they have always relied on their partnerships with state and local law enforcement agencies. This is a deliberate attempt by the Biden DOJ, by Merrick Garland, to try to maintain their ability to federalize state law enforcement. And folks, that is the real power here behind Missouri's SAPA bill only. There's not any other state in America that has it passed into law right now that does exactly this. And that's why we, the American Firearms Association, after we passed it, we're working damn hard to make sure that we defend it successfully in court.
So everyone's asking, why? Oh, do you mind? Come on. So everyone's asking, why join AFA? Patrick talked about this a second ago. What do you do with our money? Well, folks, it's very clear what AFA does and our organizations at the state level do. Have you heard of anyone else so offensive, so scary, and so damning to the agenda for Joe Biden and Merrick Garland that they have ever come they have to defend themselves and come after us? No. Everybody else just likes to pile on with lawsuits against them. we're the only ones that have come with a knife and stabbed back and said, we are taking back the freedom here, and you are not allowed to enforce gun control in our state. And so for once, this is the only time. You guys correct me. Have you ever heard of anyone else being brought to now federal court because the laws we passed were so beautiful that the left went nuts and they're now suing our legislation that we worked to pass? Absolutely not. We're the only ones bringing forward this kind of legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not been a state that has done this before we have in Missouri last year. And the American Firearms Association and our in-state affiliate, the Missouri Firearms Coalition, after we rammed this into law last year, we were there in circuit court last year pushing back on the DOJ there. We kicked their ass there. We were there in the Missouri Supreme Court with our legal team last week, and by all expectations, we're going to whoop their ass there. And that's why last night the DOJ just filed another lawsuit, this time in federal court, because they know they're being kicked out of every court in Missouri right now. And I was talking actually just a couple moments ago with the Attorney General in Missouri, Eric Schmidt, who of course is becoming kind of a household name right now across not just Missouri, but across the country, because this guy is on a relentless bender for freedom, suing the Biden administration on masking mandates and suing all kinds of jurisdictions for trying to violate state law in Missouri on stuff. And I asked him, what are our chances? And he's like, man, we're going to destroy these guys. We're going to win. Freedom's going to win. We're going to fix this. We're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. And I'll be honest, that's what we hope to see happen. Yeah. I would love to see the American Firearms Association's SAPA law in the Supreme Court, because right now, after Trump put 3 people on this court, this is the time to go for this decision. And whatever it is, we take this and win in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, we're going to see an explosion of SAPA at the state level that's going to even overcome what we saw with constitutional carry. This is the problem that the DOJ has right now, and they know it, and they're terrified. If this happens, if it spreads, then all of their agenda will collapse. And it's not just about guns, because if we can do it on the Second Amendment, we can do it on all kinds of conservative issues. We already have pro-life organizations replicating SAPA legislation right now. We have other organizations using this to try to defeat masking mandates and lockdown mandates, the ones that still exist right now. And when the states realize, we can tell the feds to go screw off, it's going to unleash a burst of freedom that this country needs in the worst way. This is exactly why we engaged in this fight, because we knew 2 years ago, if this guy, Joe Biden, if China Joe gets into the White House, we need protections at the state level, not just to fight back in Congress. We've done it all at the same time. We've been fighting like dogs, and that's why you guys should definitely be involved with the American Firearms Association. We are getting it done.
This has got me pumped up big time, and I can see in the comments folks do as well, guys. A couple things I want y'all to do right now. I'm going to read off some of the new members, and then I have kind of a question that I've seen asked. First of all, guys, let us know where you are watching from. We're all over the country right now. We're streaming on dozens and dozens of pages and other platforms all over the country, guys. Let us know where you're watching from. Myself, I'm in Kennesaw, Georgia. Let us know where you're watching from, guys. Some of the new members that have come on board here in the last few minutes, again, join up at joinafa.org. We've got John in Springfield, Missouri is in, a new member. Hey, John, glad to have you on board. Ramona in Scenic Circle, Pittsburgh, Missouri. That was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Good to have you on. A lot of Missourians coming on board here, guys. Tris, old friend here in Georgia from Guyton, Georgia. We've got James, Gillette, Wyoming is in as well. We can probably talk a little Wyoming stuff here in a little bit, guys. But, I have a question, and I just want to throw it out there. Again, I'm trying to come from the average gun owner angle, especially if you've been following this stuff for the last decade, and all of us here have been in the fight. A few years ago, maybe 5, 6, 8 years ago, what was really hot during the Obama years was the Federal Firearms Act or something. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? We see it in Montana. Yep. We've seen it in all these places. And now we have SAPA. So what is the difference? What was the folly of that legislation back in the day? I think I know what it is, but I consider a couple of these guys more experts on these issues than I do. But what is the difference between those old bills back 7-8 years ago and the SAPA stuff that we're now fighting Merrick Garland in federal court in Missouri?
Yeah, what happened in 2009 with Obama was that Firearms Freedom Act concept. And what that dealt with was firearms that were made in the state level, state rather. And if those firearms stayed in the state, then they were trying to assert state sovereignty and kept the federal government from touching that, from taking those firearms. The problem with that was twofold. First of all, the government had to enforce any violations. So take Wyoming. They passed it in 2010, and it says in the law that the state may intervene to defend you. That means they are not going to do it. So that was the first problem. But the second problem was that it didn't address the fact that we have tyrants at home. We have tyrants at home. Yeah. And what we've learned over the last 2 years with the lockdowns, with the shutdowns, with all these mandates, is that we have more tyrants at home. In fact, it reminds me of this quote from the movie The Patriot.
The Patriot.
Why would I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? And that's what we have right now.
And anybody who follows any of the gun rights battles that we've had in any of the state legislatures to pass constitutional carry and stand your ground, all these things, we know, everybody knows that we do have those 3,000 tyrants in our state capitals.
And so what this whole legislation does different from the Firearms Freedom Act is it addresses the fact that we don't want local authorities enforcing federal gun control either. And the last big problem with that, number 3, was the fact that it was always enforced by the government. And so what we've done with SAPA for the first time in American history now is left the enforcement, left the teeth up to we the people. So I'm watching Dennis Pulse right now, lifetime IGO member from Davenport. When we pass this in Des Moines, whenever that happens, if the Davenport PD storms into Dennis Pulse's house and grabs his AR-15 pistol brace or whatever the item du jour is of the day, he can take them into civil court himself. Because in Iowa, Democrat Tom Miller, the AG, will not do it. But in Republican states, in like Wyoming, for example, AG Bridget Hill, she also, as a Republican, will not do it. That was the mistake in 2009. It left the enforcement to the government. We have fixed that problem now. And with that civil penalties in our hands, we the people, that's what terrifies Merrick Garland and Joe Biden all the way to their core.
So the phrase that you use there is teeth, right? And we've heard this in the gun rights community over the last decade, 15, 20 years, maybe especially over the last decade. Teeth. There has to be teeth, meaning like, a lot of people write these bills and they don't mean anything, right? And what do we, if I'm a gun guy who's not used to the Capitol, what do we attribute that to? Is it folly? Is it stupidity? Is it laziness? Is it arrogance? Is it just like they don't want to go far enough? And we see that in the pro-life movement too, right? What's the deal? Why in 2009 was there no teeth in any of this stuff? Why wasn't anybody thinking?
I think that's an awesome question, and sometimes it's folly, sometimes it's ignorance, sometimes it's the completely wrong mindset about the world that we are living in. For example, in Pennsylvania, we have a bill called House Bill 357. It's named that intentionally by the bill sponsor. His name is Daryl Metcalf. And Daryl Metcalf is a great guy. He's introduced a lot of pro-gun bills. But when I sat down with him and told him that, dude, your bill is crap. It's this old Firearms Freedom Act language that doesn't actually protect anybody, because the enforcement is left up to the Attorney General. And for those of you who don't know, the Attorney General in Pennsylvania is a total scumbag named Josh Shapiro, who's running to be the next governor of Pennsylvania. I said, your enforcement is just ridiculous. It's got no teeth in it. And he sat there and literally tried to tell me that this is the way this is supposed to work. The Attorney General is supposed to. We can't put any pressure on the Attorney General. If our bills don't try to force him to do his job, I'm like, hey, Maroon, that's like a 1995 way of thinking of things. It doesn't have any relevance in today's day and age. It's like trying to get Josh Shapiro to enforce some of the immigration laws in this country. They just don't do it. because they're leftists. Law and order doesn't mean anything to them. So I think, Patrick, to your question, I think there's a mindset difference in some of these people where they don't understand that we are in a full-blown culture war here, and the left is playing to win. And by win, I mean they want to totally destroy our country and tear it apart all the way down to the bricks. And we can't let that happen. That's why it's so important, the work that we're doing here, everybody, for the American Firearms Association, with defending this Missouri bill, with trying to push bills like House Bill 62 in Ohio and Senate Bill 624 in Pennsylvania, and so many other these wonderful bills that are just as robust as Missouri's, because the other stuff won't do the job. It will provide political cover for trash balls, but it won't do the job that we need it to do.
So that's like the first answer, and it makes 100% sense, and it's 100% correct that there's a lot of folks that aren't aware of the enemy that we're trying to deal with these days and the realities of what enforcement looks like. There's another answer to that question, though, when it comes to how did this happen? Because a lot of times what happens is, and we've dealt with this actually all week here in the office of the American Firearms Association, we have Republicans in various states across the country right now who are contacting us, seeing the news out of Missouri, seeing what's going on, and they're saying, hey, we have what we think is SAPA legislation. Can you review it? And in the last couple of days alone, we've seen what's happened. Patrick Stewart, I'm going to get back to your question in a little bit about county resolutions in Iowa versus SAPA law. Someone remind me of that, Chris, or somebody will answer your question in a little bit, Patrick. But what's happening in many cases is national organizations that, I'll drop some names very clearly: the NRA, Gun Owners of America, the National Association for Gun Rights, and others who don't really know what SAPA does at all, are walking around these various states saying, oh, there's SAPA, and they're having their guys support this stuff. We actually have been engaged in a civil war with our affiliate in Wyoming for the last couple of days, where we have the nation's best, or the current best draft right now in the state moving forward. At the same time, we have Gun Owners of America pushing a compromise bill. It's so bad it was addressed today in the 10th Amendment Center, did a big write-up about this, because what's happening in many cases is these national groups, they've never set foot in a state capitol. They don't know who the players are, and they don't know how to write the laws that we are writing all across the country. And so what they do is they see something that purports to be SAPA, and they say, we like that. We put our thumb on it. We say yes, and then it becomes a fundraising tool. And that is a problem that we are facing right now with lots of national groups that were not involved in the fight in Missouri. And now they're walking around the country saying, this is our bill here. This is our bill here. It's a complete fraud. It's a complete grift, and it's not going to do anything to protect gun owners. And more than that, as Chris said a minute ago, what it does is it protects moderates. This is happening literally as we speak right now. Our affiliate in Wyoming, as we speak, is watching this horrible bill be referred to committee in Cheyenne. The vote happened moments ago. It was 9 opposed, 21 in favor. This horrible bill heading to committee. It's all designed to give cover to politicians. So Chris was right. The wrong mindset is number one. But number two is national groups that want to grift on the most important gun bill right now in Red America. It's shameful. It's disgusting behavior, and those organizations should be ashamed for what they're doing on this.
Well, but I think I just kind of go along with that mindset thing. I want to tell everybody, because we get asked this question a lot, and especially as we're starting to build out and staff up with the American Firearms Association, people ask us, why you? Why wouldn't we go with somebody else? And I'm here to tell you that we approached this from that very aggressive mindset that gave us the ability to look at the SAPA law and in Missouri and know the ramifications of what it would mean to pass that. We have the mindset that a win is not so important as getting damn sure that the bill is correct, that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the poison, right? That's the poison that has wrecked so many good organizations, not just in gun rights, but in, across the political spectrum on the conservative right. That's the mindset that just destroys organizations from the inside. And we do not approach things that way. Anybody who watches the push to pass constitutional carry and stand your ground in a lot of these different states know that you can always accept a watered. I mean, like with constitutional carry, for example, we could have passed it long ago if we were willing to include some gun control amendments in it. And so that's what I'm here to tell you, folks. When you join the American Firearms Association at joinafa.org, you're joining an organization that will never become so desperate to get a win that we will sell out and betray our own members. We talk about that all the time. So many people, they get involved in the fight for gun rights. And when they start off, they really mean good things. They go to state capitals, they go to Congress or whatever. And over time, instead of representing their membership to the politicians, well, they get corrupted. Their souls get corrupted. They lose their way along the way. And instead, over time, they represent the politicians back to their members. That's what's happening right now with Gun Owners of America. They're so desperate for this win on SAPA law in Wyoming and in South Dakota that they've given up the moral high ground. They've adopted a corrupted version that won't actually protect their memberships. And now they're out there stumping for it because they want that win. Hell no, not ever. We will never be that way. The people that replace us 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now will absolutely be of the exact same mindset as we are right now. That will never, ever change. That's why we're asking you guys to go to joinafa.org and sign up and become a member today. So
Mark Baker, I'm going to mention Mark Baker's comment. I'm just going to cut you off right now because he just commented. Mark Baker, IGO member, AFA member from Ashton, Iowa, 10 minutes from where I grew up. His comment is 100% correct. If the politicians aren't fighting hard against the law you're trying to push, that means it's not strong enough. And it's such a simple realization. But for so many organizations, so many lobbyists, so many other people, they just sit there and say, oh my gosh, we have to pass a bill. What people like Mark and all the rest of the patriots that comprise the folks that back up AFA and all of our state groups understand is this is a fight to the finish. This is a fight all the way to the end. And if we don't have people who are trying to shut us down and overturn our laws, then we're wasting our time. And when we began the American Firearms Association a couple of years ago, we knew that we were never, if we went down that road, we're just wasting our time. We're just wasting our time.
And we're hookers too. Like we're hookers. We're total political hookers at that point. If you're not getting, I'm going to see if I can put this up here on the screen. If you're not getting headlines like this, I don't know if people can see that right there, but that's Politico this morning. That is Politico this morning. This is the article. Politico's attacking it. The whole left. I mean, you can do Google searches on this right now, everybody. This is where Merrick Garland and China Joe Biden's DOJ is focusing their attention right now because it poses the greatest threat to every left-wing piece of trash agenda that they are trying to get passed. That's what this article is all about. And that's why we are so laser focused on getting this stuff right. You have to get it right. Otherwise, it doesn't do the job. And if it doesn't do the job, you're not going to get sued by the Biden's DOJ.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just that simple.
So go ahead, Alex.
I was going to go back to the Patrick's comment, not you, Patrick, but the Patrick in the comments asking about what's the difference between county resolutions and SAPA legislation. And it's the same difference between fake SAPA and real SAPA. Sadly, both sometimes are good intended with the county resolutions, but there has to be a civil enforcement mechanism. So a resolution is just simply the county supervisors or whatever you want to call them in your state saying, hey, we believe in the Second Amendment in our county and we don't want to see bad gun laws here. But the moment that an executive order or federal legislation comes down that is unconstitutional, outlawing firearms of certain sizes and types, outlawing high magazines that they call high caps. The moment that those come down and the sheriff's department in one of your blue cities or police chief in one of your blue cities comes out and starts to enforce it, you can hold up that little piece of paper and says, hey, the county attorney said that, the county supervisor said, we're not in favor of gun control in our county. That means absolutely nothing. That means nothing. There's no way to enforce it. And so bad SAPA has the same thing. I see it in Alabama right now with SB 1. There is no enforcement mechanism if you're relying on the same liberal tyrants, the attorney general's office in most states, to enforce it. It won't happen. So if true SAPA were to be passed here in Georgia, SB 597, I can tell you why Sheriff Tebow or whatever his last name is, here's why he's not going to come into my house if they ban 30-round magazines. His insurance company's got to come up with $15 million. That's the enforcement mechanism that I would have with SAPA here in Gwinnett County, Georgia, is the $50,000 civil fines is the deterrent, not some slip of paper that the county commissioner sat down and said, we support the Second Amendment. That's not binding. That does nothing.
Yeah. And just a point of clarification there on that. That does not mean we're putting down all of the work that so many people have done into getting those county resolutions in place. We understand the desire for politics to be local and everything, but again, they're in a lot of cases they're not binding, and we're just really of the opinion with the way America was laid out that we would much rather have the state, a sovereign state, standing in between federal gun control laws and their enforcement. If it's made it all the way down to the county level, we are in big trouble in America. We think that the state level SAPA bills are far more robust and appropriate and powerful at maintaining and defending people's rights.
They're actual law, and a resolution is a great concept, but it's kind of a statement of appreciation or a statement of intent or the mood of the body, whether it's a county, a federal government, state government. SAPA law is law. SAPA law is binding. And so the county resolutions, Iowa, Patrick asked, Iowa's got 32 of them, I think now, 33 maybe after the meeting tonight. And I think it was Fayette County. Again, great idea, but the real pain that Merrick Garland's trying to stop is SAPA law. And you're never going to see the DOJ trying to overturn the resolution at the county level. So anyway, that's the real issue there. Patrick had something he was dying to say, and I'm going to talk about the supremacy clause issues here in a moment, but Patrick, I cut you off twice, so go for it.
No, it's fine. I think, Alex talked about money a little bit there on his old school calculator, but let's quantify this, okay? Like, why? Okay, this guy cares because he's a tyrant and he wants all these like drug task force and send ATF, Project Gestapo into the cities and all this stuff. But like just one state, and I think, Aaron, you told me this number the other day, Missouri, was it like $330 million or something is on the line over the course of a year or a few years? I mean, just imagine, I'm here in Georgia. Alex is in Georgia. You go to New York, you go to all these states. I mean, you're talking, this isn't like $10 million or $100,000. This is like billions of dollars that are on the line if Merrick Garland goes down here, potentially, right?
Yeah, we want to talk about the objections here because everybody watching right now, we're not in every state capital yet. We're getting there. But when you're seeing your state talk about SAPA legislation right now, if you're in a red state, you have got to be able to spot a phony from the real deal, because what you're going to find is that it's the law enforcement department heads in your state who are going to flood your capital and demand the bill is either killed or watered down to be useless. So Patrick mentioned civil enforcement. That's number one. It has to be left in the hands of we the people, not the government. The other things you're going to hear a lot then from law enforcement is that this is anti-cop. This is anti-cop. This is not good for law enforcement. And they'll come down there with 20, 30, 50 of their guys in their uniforms, taxpayer-funded clothes, cars, gas, etc.
Hotel.
And they'll sit there and claim that frontline cops don't like SAPA. That's backwards. Frontline cops love SAPA. I'll use Missouri as an example. In Missouri, no department head can turn to his department, his officers, and say, go out there and enforce Biden's executive gun controls. If they do, they're going to point to SAPA law and say, I can't. Here's the law. That's illegal. And it protects them from a tyrannical department head between having to enforce that unconstitutional crap and lose their job. So frontline cops love SAPA. What you referred to, though, Patrick, was the profit motive that influences so many of the department
Everything's
heads.
about money, man. And
this is police chiefs. This is sheriffs. What we found out in Missouri, and this is the same thing in every state, is that this is kind of nuanced, but I'll make it very, very simple. Your local, state, county law enforcement agencies, depends on the state, depends on the population, depends on interstates, whatever, et cetera. A lot of times they will loan out their cops to federal task forces. This could be FBI, it could be DOJ, it could be ATF, usually ATF, marshals. And here's how this works. Let's say the St. Louis PD.
Listen to this, everybody. They always say follow the money. What Aaron is talking about here is mapping this out. It's as bad as you always thought it would be.
So again, taking Missouri right now as an example, but it applies in all states in the country. Let's say the St. Louis PD loans out 10 of their officers to an ATF task force, and they work with them for a year, 6 months. These are not small duration deals. When they work with a federal task force, any money that the federal task force seizes through civil asset forfeiture, 80% of that cash reverts back to the local jurisdiction. So if you're the St. Louis police chief, you want as many of your guys as you can on a federal task force because you get so much freaking money that comes into your coffers. Now, in Missouri, over the last since 2000 and 2019, $178 million has poured into local coffers through that program. Just again, one more time, it's $178 million that hit their pockets because of these federal task forces. But when we passed SAPA, a lot of those federal task forces disappeared because it was all about enforcing federal gun laws. And so what you're seeing right now in Missouri and what you're seeing right now all across America in red states is law enforcement opposing SAPA. And it's all about law and order. It's all about keeping criminals in prison. What they never talk about is that it literally impacts them to the tune of millions and millions of dollars every single year.
That's what I was going to ask you, Aaron. So I was running some of the communication stuff. You were doing the lobby work on SAPA in the Missouri legislature. When these people are there in their taxpayer-funded uniforms, staying in their taxpayer-funded hotels and their taxpayer-funded cars and gas, did they have the intellectual honesty in committee to stand there and say, we have these highly lucrative partnerships with these federal task forces from which we get massive, massive money. We have a huge financial motive. Or did they sit there and talk about public safety and maintaining? I mean, were they ever honest about these things?
No, it's kind of a sad fact that we did not have these numbers in our possession during the committee action last year. We came across them, after the bill was already passed. But if we did, it would have been the mother of all throwdowns in committee because at no time did anybody ever volunteer the fact that, just to be transparent, there's a lot of cash on the line for my department, my police department, my sheriff's department. They never brought that up. And no one ever asked them because, frankly, we didn't have these numbers at that time. If you want more information on this, folks, just Google the Federal Equitable Sharing Program. Federal Equitable Sharing Program with the Institute for Justice. That's two things you can search. And they track your state down to the penny. How much federal seizure money reverts to your state when they are a part of a federal task force. So it doesn't matter what state you're in. When you see your sheriff, state patrol commandant, police chief, whatever it is, out there attacking your gun rights, whether it's SAPA or anything else, you need to ask the question right away. Is this in part because you're receiving money from federal task force work? In fact, Sheriff, how much have you received as a department over the last decade? How much do you stand to lose if we pass SAPA here in Iowa or Wyoming or Ohio or Georgia? Because these are the profit motive questions that need to be asked. And not to get down too deep in the weeds, but just you have to be aware of this too. Some states have already dealt with this. They have cleaned up civil asset forfeiture. In Missouri, for example, they can't take a dime at the state level unless there's a conviction in court first. And then if they do, any money seized goes to the school system. So cops in Missouri, department heads in Missouri can't make any money off of policing. There's no profit motive. But these guys bypass the state, they bypass the law and join a federal task force. They can give a middle finger to the General Assembly. They can give a middle finger to state law, jump in bed, and they can sit there and suck off Joe Biden's teat and get all that cash in their pocket. You like that, Patrick?
Yeah.
And violate state law. It's disgusting. But when we realize this as gun owners, man, we can negate their talking points very quickly because, unfortunately, they have surrendered the honor of their position. They have surrendered the honor of the legacy of their profession for federal cash, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, that's just what's it's such a betrayal of their badge. You know, we've seen this so much now over the last couple of years. We see these sheriffs, we see these chiefs of police, always the chiefs of police, the fraternal order of police, usually in all these different states. They stand there and they testify against freedom, against these bills. They know damn well, they know very well that the law-abiding gun owner, the concealed handgun license holder, those types of people, the shooters who go every Saturday and practice, they know they don't have any problem with them. But this is why you never, ever see deputies. You never, ever see street cops come into these committees and testify against these bills. Those are the people who actually fight crime, who actually interface with the criminal crowd. And they know very good and well that the gun owner, the person who loves this country, who works hard to provide for their family, they know that those people aren't the problem. They know that the criminals will never obey any of the laws. But that's why, I mean, so that this really starts to get into the nuts and bolts and explain why so many of these bills are opposed by the brass of these departments, of these associations. And again, this really reinforces this motive, this
profit
attempt
motive
by the federal government, by Biden, by the left, by the bureaucrats in DC to federalize local law enforcement. This, what you just said there, Aaron, about how the state of Missouri passed a civil asset forfeiture law that fixed that problem at the state level. The feds then going right around that and basically telling the state of Missouri to go screw themselves. I mean, that's what we're fighting here, folks, with SAPA. That's why this is so beautiful. It's because it drills all the way down into those local those local law enforcement agencies where they do have a bunch of statists running the departments. And it says, no. You can't even try to end run around us like you've done with these partnerships. And naughty, the people now, and it's not just us who are going to enforce it. The people, if you trample on their rights, the people can take your departments to court. And that's why SAPA is so beautiful.
So that's what you got to watch out for, folks. When you see local law enforcement opposing your gun rights, whether it's SAPA, constitutional carry, stand your ground law, anything else, you just have to ask them point blank, how much cash do you have coming into your coffers through these programs? And once you ask that question, you have destroyed their moral authority, and you can move on to the next issue. And that's what we're doing here with SAPA in Missouri and across the country. It's going to continue to highlight, and that's the problem these guys have. I think generationally speaking, the law enforcement community, their lobbyists in state capitals and in Washington, D.C., they could presume upon the presumed support, the default support from gun owners. Because for generations, we're law-abiding citizens. We support law enforcement. And they sat there and took advantage of that trust. And they've used that to squelch our freedoms. And so we're done saying that we give carte blanche to anybody in any state capital. We back the blue as long as they back the Constitution, period. We don't back a politician blindly, and we're not going to back this profession blindly either. And so that's what you want to keep your eyes out for, is that type of stuff. And all the rest of their arguments, supremacy clause, we can deal with that. Issues about not surviving in court, we can deal with that. There's lots of easy answers there, but take away their moral authority. And the problem these guys have is that older generation gave them that default trust, but people my age, and I'm the old guy here, people my age, anybody on down below, after the tyranny we have lived through from local tyrants over the last 2 years, that default respect is gone. And if local law enforcement department heads want to regain that, they're going to have to earn that trust. Meantime, that's just gone.
And in that note, Aaron, you know, a lot of people always say, "Oh, yeah, well, these sheriffs would never order your guns confiscated or something like that, or these police chiefs in these big cities would never order that." Well, how much? And we say bullshit. You know, number one,
absolutely.
The beat cops themselves might not, but the brass absolutely would give that order. But how many of those people stood up to the tyranny that we've seen over the last 2 years here in America? They went right along with everything. They implemented everything from the top down. And so we can't trust the leadership levels of these people at all. In fact, right now, this morning, as we speak, right in the Ohio General Assembly, Michael Weinman, the lobbyist for the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police, is testifying against constitutional carry. He's betraying all of the members of that organization down at the bottom, but they are there using their badge, dishonoring their badge, and trying to clamp down on the rights of the people. We have to craft these laws in such a way that we remove this discretion that they have and force them into a position where if they violate our Constitution, they pay for it dearly through financial.
Alex, you saw that over in Alabama the other day, huh? Sheriff's Association.
Oh my goodness, I did. It just you stand there and you have such clear polarization in the room. Who's there for freedom and who's there to oppose freedom and lobby against it? You know, it's a lot of great folks. I love talking with them before and after the meeting. You know, guys that own gun ranges, those that have been coming for a decade trying to pass constitutional carry. But the opposition, man, they're in their slick brown suits, very old school. You know, they've been pressed. They're all lined up out the door. All these sheriffs are lined up out the door from all these big counties, big city counties and whatnot. And you know what? I got to drive a ways to get there. I kind of feel like I got some road on me. I want to wash my hands and clean up. These guys are prim and proper, straight from a hotel. They thank their constituents for paying for it, but they're there to stand up and say crime, 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 officer safety, officer safety, officer safety. We've heard that spiel against every pro-gun bill ever. And I would just tell them, and I told them right to their face, you know, it's the very first phone call I ever had from an Alabama Firearms Association member. The very first phone call was from a deputy. Like, hey, what's going on with your organization? Just found you. I'm like, hey, my website's not even done yet.
Cool.
So we talked for a bit. And I'm like, this is it. This is what we want. And SAPA is really important to us. And he's like, I never heard of it. Tell me about it. So I explained it to him. And this dude was like, that is awesome. I need that. My sheriff would fire me if I didn't enforce gun control. If he had the opportunity to enforce it, I would lose my job. He's like, I would love it. And I'm like, well, what about public testimony? Absolutely not. I would lose my job if I came out in support. Representative Shane Stringer from Alabama introduced a constitutional carry. His sheriff called him in and said, drop your bills. Like, I can't. I need it. It like, we need it. Everyone has it. He's like, great. You lost your job. So the beat cops, the deputies, man, they call us all the time and they love it. And we love having them in our memberships because they just make up some of the best citizens. But they're all like, one of them asked me, not the same one. Another one asked me, like, is my name going to be listed anywhere on your website? I'm like, no. It's like, good. It can't be, because I would lose my job if my boss found out that I was with you guys. And so, not that they're running around scared. They're cops, for crying out loud. They're stalwarts. Most of them are stalwarts. But you know, the political pressure from the heads is there. But the guys on the ground, they love it, and we love it. But just to see them all in Montgomery, just lined up, and you know, they only get to speak they only allow 3 speakers for and against a bill. But there's 30, 40 strong, and they just sit there and they scowl. They scowl at representatives. They scowl at the opposition. They try and intimidate you from standing up there and getting up to the podium. And guys, here at AFA and all of our state organizations, we ain't afraid. We love it. We absolutely love telling them and calling them out in the mat for it. And especially when we find out how many hundreds of millions of dollars they're taking in through equitable sharing. It's what a sick word. So anyway, yes, that's my
well, I mean, look, we can see what we're up against here, guys. Absolutely. We know that. Our loyal members know that. If you're not yet a member of the American Firearms Association, we're in Alabama, we're in Georgia, we're in Ohio, Minnesota, all over the country. And the topic of the show today, of course, was this case in Missouri over the Second Amendment Preservation Act, where your American Firearms Association is in federal court against Merrick Garland. This is the guy that Barack Obama appointed or nominated for the Supreme Court and was rejected, believe it or not, by Mitch McConnell. And now this case is so important. It's AFA versus Merrick Garland. Join up with the American Firearms Association today. It's fast, it's simple, it's safe, it's secure. $35 a year or whatever the heck you want to pay above that, guys. We will definitely not turn it away, but we are using your resources to go after the gun grabbers, stand toe-to-toe with these people, and we're going to win. And with your help, we're going to win. So let me read off a few of the new members. I know I promised this earlier, guys. The website, again, is joinafa.org. We've got Joe in Altoona, Iowa, is in. Patrick, who was pretty active on the show today from Eldridge, Iowa, is in.
There we go.
Jeff,
Iowa.
Yes, exactly. Jeff from Beaver, Ohio, is in. Who else? We got Howard from Sayre, Pennsylvania, Sayre. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that. Who else do we have here? They're pouring in right now, guys. Everybody hopping on board. Get involved in the fight. Look, you ask that question all the time. Which group do I join? Well, here we are talking to you exactly what we're doing, telling you what's going on. You're going to see Aaron and others in federal court probably here at some point. Get on board and join up with the American Firearms Association today. And yes, as a token of our appreciation, you also get your official membership T-shirt and decal from the American Firearms Association. So, Aaron, why don't you recap real quick and let's head out. Everybody have a great day. Let's go kick ass and save our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, I think, guys, this is very simple. We're going to win this fight. I was talking to Eric Schmidt, the Attorney General in Missouri, just a little bit ago, and he was like, man, the law is on our side. Freedom is on our side. The Constitution is on our side. The Missouri Firearms Coalition and AFA's legal team and briefs are on our side. We're going to win this fight. If it goes to the Supreme Court all the way up, we're not going to stop. This is the fight of our time. We've been engaged in the fight for constitutional carry. The AFA guys here have for the last 15 years. But by God, SAPA legislation and putting that line in the sand and stopping Merrick Garland and Joe Biden. This is the next iteration of our fight for freedom. So AFA is committed. We're going all the way. If you guys can stand with us, get involved today. JoinAFA.org. This fight's going to get hot. Much more information to come, guys. That's what we have time for right now. Share our video, and we'll keep you informed.
Take care.
Thank you.